tool. There we go, as if by magic. So just to be aware of that as well throughout. Lastly, I would be remiss of me not to say this event is already logged for 5 CPD points. So for the key beans amongst you, do make sure you take a bit of time to do your reflection and get that submitted as well. You can find that when you log into the website after today. It'll be in your in progress tab, all ready for you to go. So without further ado, I'm delighted to be joined today by Kiana, Abigail and James, who are our 3 speakers for today's event. I will let them introduce themselves as we move into each of their time slots today. But we're delighted that they've been able to join us. Workplace wellbeing is a topic that came up very heavily in the CIPR members survey just at the tail end of last year. So it's great that we're being able to put on this event. For those of you that are members, you should have hopefully already received your members survey link for this year. And it's important that you do take a bit of time to complete. It helps us as groups put on events like this to support you in your roles. So that is everything from me. I've got a short handover just to Ben as well, who's just going to introduce himself and talk a little bit more about the theme of wellbeing before we get started. So thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Brilliant introduction. As Dan said, I'm Benevolent. I'm the chair of CIPR Southwest, and we're delighted to be hosting this joint event with CIPR Inside today. I'm really pleased to be joined by Kareen, Abigail and James, our brilliant speakers, who are going to talk about the very topical topic of workplace wellbeing. I think we can all agree that the last 2 years have been pretty tough, and it's really shone the spotlight on the importance of well-being and looking after ourselves so that we can look after others. As a wise person once said to me, you can't pour from an empty cup, and I'm a staunch believer in that. We've all been placed under huge pressure, both personally and professionally, juggling our roles, whether that's internal or external comms roles, alongside family lives and all the commitments and the trauma that we've been through. But as we now start to move towards this new, whatever this new normal looks like, of hybrid working, flexible working, or returning to the office, the time couldn't be better to really examine today how we get on top of workplace wellbeing, how we look after ourselves, and as professional communicators, I think it's vital that we really grasp what true wellbeing looks like. So that's enough from me. I'm not the expert. It's a great pleasure that I'll hand you over to Kareen Griffiths, who is a mindfulness teacher, change and communications consultant, and the founder of Calmify. So over to you, Kareen.
Thank you. Was I going to do the infamous I've not muted myself or mute myself kind of thing? Welcome, welcome, welcome. And thank you very much for having me here today. And I'm really looking forward to running this session with you. It's a short session of just a little taster for you, really, for you who have done all of this work, all of the work that you have to continue to do as communicators. So I wanted to give something to you and give you a few techniques, obviously, to help you with finding those moments of calm when we have such busy lives. So welcome to your 20-minute session today. So the first thing I wanted to do when I talk about mindfulness is just to ask the question, does anybody out there do kind of mindfulness, meditation, focus exercise, anything like that? If you can either hold your hand up or pop it in the chat, it would really just be good to get a sense of anybody that does that at the moment. Great, meditation and breath work. Brilliant, it's great to see coming through. Yes, some breathing. Yes, headspace, quite a lot. Yeah, very challenging to keep it up as part of the daily routine. Oh, it's really good to see that. Yeah, Ben as well. Nice one, Ben. Fall out of it a little bit. No, that's brilliant. And thank you. Hard to find the time. Yeah, busy. We have these busy lifestyles that we have. So yeah, through the eye. Yeah. Oh, what I'm really loving here is actually seeing that people have engaged in this. Sometimes that even the word mindfulness can really sort of put people off, and they don't do that. It'd be really good to know actually for some of those people who do mindfulness. Do you find that it actually sort of helps you in your work in comms? Do you find you're able to use those techniques when you're actually working in your day-to-day roles for those people that do that? You could just use the chat or hand up. It would just give me 5 minutes. Yeah, not tried into in my work. Okay. Great. Brilliant. So ability to focus, create space. Yeah, this is beautiful. So we're going to be able to do some of that today, and especially for those people who have never maybe even had any opportunities to do mindfulness. So we are going to be taking this from a beginner's point of view. We're going to go through what mindfulness is as well, and we're going to learn a few techniques on the call today, but we're just going to have a moment just to set the scene and just to be here. We're going to start off with our first exercise today. So for all of you that are here on our screen, just want you to take a moment just to be here, and I want you to just find an item if you can, just an item that you can grab next to you. I've got a pen. Could you all just grab something that you have? It can be anything small. And would you all do that for me? Obviously, I can't see you all, so great, just to grab an item. Okay, so I'm good, fab. And if you could just share either what your item is, and I'm going to go through a bit of a focus and breathing exercise just to get us started today. So when we talk about mindfulness, it's about being present. It's about sort of being here. And so you might be sitting there, got your email. So do everything you can to just for these few moments to put your phone down, to move away from your emails, and just to be here on your on screen or off screen with your item. Just take a few moments with your item. I just want you to start to explore the item that you have in front of you. And as you just start to explore it, what I mean by that is just start to look at it, start to look at the item. And if you're in your home or in your office, just take a few moments just sitting into your chair, sitting back into the chair, just relaxing into the chair, just letting your shoulders just drop. You're just sitting, there's just you, us and this item. And at this present moment, there is nothing else that matters right now. Your mind might wander off, just bring it back to the item. I just would like you for these few moments just to look and explore the item that you have like. And when you do, I want you to just look at the shape. Is it shiny? Is it dull? Are there any marks on your item? Does it feel hot? Does it feel cold? Is there anything? I'd like you to explore it and see if there's anything on here that you've never noticed before on this item that you've had. Just take a few minutes and look at it from different angles. Look at the shape, and also, but look at any reflections in the light where you're sitting. You may think to yourself, why am I describing this item in my head? But it's about just looking at it for what it is. Your mind might be distracted. You might want to be moving on to something else. But the key point here is actually just to sit with this item just for a few moments. Again, just feel yourself, you're back against the chair, just to relax into the chair. Nowhere else to go right now. We're just slowing things right down because we're used to moving at pace. And we're used to moving on to something else, but in order to be present, you have to be here. So I have a question with the item that you had. Was there anything on there that you'd noticed that you'd never seen before on the item that you have today? Again, you can either hold your hand up using the chat or pop it into the chat. Mel, you saw 2 tiny buttons. What was your item, Mel? The light reflecting off it, Ben. Yes, the pen says focus on it. The brand name before, yeah. Lots of cracks. Oh, your scrunchie's a bit frayed. Has a very shiny clip. This is great. Twinkly flecks in the pebble. Yeah, this is really good. And what we just was doing there, how did I get chocolate on my nail file? That's brilliant. Thank you for doing that. And yeah, as I say, keep popping in the chat if there is anything that you notice. But the premise of what we were just doing about being present is, with mindfulness, is just taking this item. It's a short exercise that sometimes I get people to just bring them to, you know, being here, is to kind of notice sometimes how often we feel like we're in a familiar situation and we're doing something that's familiar. But actually, you know, I've picked up this pen a million times, or you may have picked up the pebble or put the scrunchie in your hair. But if we take a few moments just to stop and notice, we spent about 2 minutes there, 3 minutes, you start to notice how you just slow things down. And also what becomes possible, things that you've seen that you've never seen before. And this is what it can feel like in our life of autopilot. As you know, communications people, we're busy, and we go into situations and we think we've got all the answers. And then when we're so stressed, it's really difficult sometimes to stop and understand what's possible and see what's possible and be open to new things. So by slowing things down a little, then you start to notice things you've never seen before. We call it a beginner's mind. It's like seeing something familiar for the first time. And it's a really good exercise, a small exercise that you can practice. And again, this is all about little things that you can practice before you go into a meeting, and just think, okay, I'm just going to focus on this item. Just slow down, slow everything down. And I'm not going to attach a narrative to this item. You're not going to say, well, this is what I'm going to do with my pen, or this is what I'm going to do with the scrunchie. All you're doing is looking at it for what it is. And that's what kind of mindfulness is, really. It's about being present and looking at something without judging it. And this is some of the things that we do all the time, judge things. So thank you so much for sharing, you know, your item and what it was and what you actually noticed, because in order to notice anything, you have to be present to notice it, and you've got to give yourself that space and that time and those few minutes to notice things that are different. Mindfulness is about noticing things and being aware of what you notice in the moment. Some people think mindfulness is about trying to shut things out and block things out. And what we're actually doing is building up our mental capacity to be more aware of what we're noticing. But in order to do that, you've got to reduce the stress bucket a little bit, because when we're busy, it's really difficult to do that. Did that make sense to everyone? Again, either hand up or in the chat, you have a moment. Okay, I'm going to share a couple of slides with you here. And I don't like to use slides too often on these sessions, because it's all about just being here and connecting to being here. But I'm going to just share a couple of slides because there are a couple of things I wanted to share about mindfulness and how it will help you as a practitioner, you as an individual, and then in the work that you do. So I'm just going to do my little screen share, she says. Okay. And just let me know, hopefully you can all see that. Okay, so I wanted to share a little bit about mindfulness and just some of the things that we need to know. There is a lot of science behind mindfulness. Research has shown that by practicing mindfulness, the grey matter in your brain's amygdala, the region known for stress, it can become smaller. It also really helps with our creativity, the prefrontal cortex of the brain responsible for things like planning and problem solving, controlling your emotions. This becomes thicker when you practice these exercises. And that was just like one little mini exercises. But again, things like when you use the app, you're building that mental capacity in your brain. It's also really great for memory, for learning. Again, this becomes thicker when we're practicing mindfulness. And that's kind of just some of the key points, highlights of mindfulness, the science behind it, and there's a lot of science behind it. But the second part I wanted to share with you is really the principles and the behaviours that sit behind mindfulness, because actually it is a Buddhist tradition, and some people want to move away from that, or they get a little bit frightened when we say that because they think it's spiritual. But actually what it's really saying here is that there are some principles It's about looking after ourselves while being aware of how we are in order to help others. In our roles of communicators, we always have to think about how we are when we're interacting with all of the people that we're supposed to serve in our organisation, as well as our leaders. So these are like some of the principles. They're basically the attitudes, the behaviours that we are to be more patient with ourselves. How do we make sure we have a beginner's mind? How do we trust more? How do we non-strive? How do we learn to let go of all the things that we do in order to be more mindful? These are the things that we talk what mindfulness is. So I've got a question here. When I go through, or you just look at any of those things, do any of these things resonate with you? Meaning, do you find any of these hard to do yourself? In terms of, do you find it hard to sometimes let go? Do you find it hard to sometimes trust? Do you find it hard to, not strive all the time? Or do you find to accept things? So just, again, you can pop the words in the chat. Just share if you feel comfortable. Anything here that you think, oh yeah, that resonates with me? Okay. Yes, letting go is always there. And they are interlinked, but at the same time, there are some things that pop out for people like, oh yeah, I really struggle to let go of when I come out of a meeting, I'm still holding on to, well, I think this is still right, Yeah, letting go. Little annoyances, yeah, work of the day, yeah. Yes, trust, yeah. These are, it's really great when we hear some of this acknowledgement of like, okay, so what are the things that I don't feel comfortable with? Because these things play into how well we look after ourselves. If we struggle to let go, we can hold that tension and that stress in ourselves and in our body. That's why sometimes when we are stressed out or really overwhelmed, you go on holiday and you end up with a big fat cold and flu for the first week because you're trying to release that, because what we're not doing is we're not releasing that through our day. And what I'm sharing here with you is that doing mindfulness exercises, you can start to practice letting go of things in order to let go of some of the stress that we hold in our body. And if you're doing that through moments of your day, then you're not carrying it with you, in your shoulders, in your chest before you go into a meeting. You're letting that go through the day. So it's all about creating these moments in your day to release that. That's kind of your essence of it. But actually the transformational work around mindfulness is the fact that when you really know how this is part of your daily routine, you start to incorporate things like, when I go into a meeting, am I sitting here and have I got my patience? Am I being patient in this meeting? Actually, am I letting go and letting go for possibilities? But if we're stressed out and we're in tension, it's really difficult to let go. If we're stressed out and we're always like overwhelmed, then it's difficult to accept situations because our mental capacity closes when we're stressed and it's more open when we're a bit more relaxed. So stress is good. Don't get me wrong. It's not like no stress at all. I don't walk around in some Zen-like, life. I'd love to say I do. But what I do notice is that if I go in and I'm really busy and I go into a meeting and I'm really got, lots going on and email box overflowing, I notice how my ego may come with me to a meeting and that I'm looking to control what I want. And by the time I sometimes think, okay, am I sitting and breathing before I go in? Then I'm more open to what's possible. And an example of that was then, okay, so what exercises do I need to do? And that focus exercise I gave at the beginning was just giving you a little, really small taster of, if I just spend some time just doing this through the day, the chances are that I can learn to let go a little bit more. I can be more open to what's possible. I can maybe be able to trust, but these principles do take work. It's definitely not a few bite-sized mindfulness exercise and then ta-da, all of this takes work. As Caroline's point, when I worked in an office, I found the journey home, frustrations in the day. It's tougher now at home, absolutely. And that's what we're seeing a little bit of in the way that the hybrid way of working is, when we're at home, it's difficult to step away. But I always try and say to people, put it in your diary, put it in the diary, put 5 minutes into the diary, if you can, at intermittent points in the day, that that is your stepping away. And sometimes people find it difficult to go and sit and just be in silence. So then I just say, pick up your item or have a glass of water, just spend that time with it, because those are the things that are going to just help with those moments to bring you that sense of calm in the autopilot of life. And at the same time, it's also about being present, means that you're here for yourself and you're here for people. Our job is about interaction, listening, conversations all of the time. So being present in those meetings and being able to sit and be calmer in those meetings are going to make you more effective. And I like to use an analogy, which is like a snow globe. Mindfulness for me is like you take the snow globe and you shake it, and everything that's going on when you shake it is those thoughts, emotions, things that you're thinking about. But if you spend a moment just to breathe and just release, you just look and you can see everything. The snow globe settled to the bottom, but you can see everything you still need to do. You can point it out because you've given yourself that moment, and then you go back in and it goes back up again, you know, and that's how we can go through the day. Your mindfulness is just to bring it down so you can notice and you can make the right choices you want to make, the right intentions for your day, and the right decisions in your meetings are better focus and performance. Does that make sense to everyone? Again, you know, hand up or in the chat, because we're going to close off shortly with a few thoughts on how mindfulness can help you as communicators. I'm just going to share my screen for the last time. So here, when I talk about mindful communication lessons, one of the key benefits is about being able to be in interactions and not judge the way of how we interact with people, of how we're interacting with people. So mindfulness gives you that pause, which allows you to understand what's coming up for you. And if we're going to go into a situation judging what's going to happen, it allows you to be curious and bring awareness, because you're creating that space. As communicators, it allows you to fully arrive, I say ready and as relaxed as possible for your conversations. By breathing, the little bit that you did there, breathing, let you relaxing your shoulders off to adjust and resist the urge in these conversations to give people space, because that's what we want to do, is give people space, but give yourself space, that you don't feel like you've got to have the answers all of the time and the moment. But if you do, you're choosing those answers because you're here and you're able to be here and really listen. Gives you the ability to redirect your attention away from the stress response and narrow to what's happening. So by doing mindfulness regularly and keeping that as part of your exercise and the muscles in your brain, you can start to really choose where your attention is. I've kind of find it a bit of a laser focus for me now. When I'm making decisions, I can actually really see where my attention is, and I'm able to use the breathing techniques that I've learned or teach and pull on that in the moment, not after the moment, which is sometimes what we find. And lastly, it's just to help you to let go and bounce back from the negative emotions and reduce this reactivity. So mindfulness is really good for that. Helps you to just bounce back, you know, not literally bouncing, but to come back into a situation. And when you feel those uncomfortable emotions come up sometimes when things haven't gone our way, just helps us reduce that way we react and that fight and flight response that we can have. And those are just a few things that can help you as a communicator, but also as an individual, just to have those moments where you feel a little bit more calm. So I'm going to just ask one question before I close very quickly, because I know it's time to move on. Do you think there's one place or time in your day where you think you can plan in 5 minutes of mindfulness? And if you do, can you just pop that in the chat and then I will close. Where do you think you can fit that in? First thing, yeah. Great. Lunchtime immediately after work. Fab. Before the children wakes up. I know how that one goes. The dog, yeah, first thing and last thing. Fabulous. And already this is about setting just an intention. One thing, and you just start off with mindfulness with one thing. Thank you so much for your time today and for this short session, and I hope you found one thing helpful.
Thank you, Kareen. Yeah, absolutely, so much value there. Just so many practical tips. I think one of the things for us as communicators, we are always on, we're always juggling so many different plates. yet we're also very good at multitasking and segmenting between one to the other. So there's absolutely no reason why all of us here today can't create that space for ourselves and intentionally create that time. I particularly liked one of the comments in the chat from Laura, who mentioned about transitional activity. I think that's a really valuable thing to take away, some kind of 5-10 minute pocket that we can all create in our days, especially if you're working from home, where we can build in that mindfulness. So thank you again, Kareen, that was really brilliant. Next up, joining us is Abigail Hirshman. Abigail is the Workplace Programme Director for mental health charity, the Charlie Waller Trust. I've had the privilege of working with Charlie Waller throughout the pandemic. They're a fantastic organisation. And over to you, Abigail. Thank you for joining us.
Okay. I think Kareen's slides are still up. I'm happy to talk about mindfulness, but I certainly won't talk about it in any way, shape or form as well as that was presented. Thank you so much, Kareen. It was just great. I actually just breathed probably for the first time today, obviously not literally, but yeah, that whole, that whole concept that we're talking about here, there's been so many things that have happened in the last couple of years for everybody, and it's just how we take that space. And that somebody said it quite early on in the pandemic, they weren't working from home, they were living at work. So how you create that space in your day between your working day, if you do work from home, and your home life is something that people, I think, are still challenged with. So I'm delighted to be here. I'm so excited to be talking to communications professionals, because it's not an audience we often bring together, but actually in terms of workplace wellbeing, I think the missing link over the last sort of year or so has really become clearer around how we engage with our communication experts in translating our workplace wellbeing programs to our workplace communities. So I'm the director of the Workplace for Charlie Waller. Charlie Waller is a charity, and we provide free training, education, awareness sessions in schools, colleges and universities. And we also have just started a new parent support group where we help parents who have a child with a mental health condition, how they can help to navigate and manage those relationships. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. Okay, so as I said, I'm director of the workplace program. So what do we do in terms of the workplace? So the program I deliver is actually a paid for service, and we deliver essentially consultancy. So we work with organisations on developing a whole organisational approach to mental health at work, which essentially is about having a range of interventions, mindfulness being one of them, and that's aimed at different audiences in the organisation to really bring it in a root and branch approach. And then part of that may be training for managers. And we also deliver webinars on specific topics around things like maybe sleep and mental health, things people don't tend to think about so much, or more general topics around I don't know, managing your stress. And I think some of those tips in mindfulness are so crucial to linking to how we reduce our stress and our issues that we may have. So essentially, mental health has risen up the agenda, hasn't it, in the last couple of years? I've been working in this space for a long time, but it really started to accelerate during the pandemic. And good mental health is essentially how we cope with our day-to-day lives, how we work well and interact positively with others. And we all have good mental health. But equally, we all can at times have poor mental health. And that's when we may be struggling, with our mood or feelings of stress or anxiety. Mental health is essentially how we think, feel and behave. So at times our thoughts may become a little distorted. I saw some things in that chat, when we overstrive or we spend a lot of time thinking about that meeting that we just had and how we could have done it differently. And we may feel slightly differently. So we may have more heightened emotions. We may be more tearful or more angry. And also we may behave different ways. So we may start to avoid things or start to self-medicate, increase our alcohol or our food or those things that are a negative coping strategy. But things in the moment, our brain isn't able to think rationally. So we reach for something that's going to give us a quick fix. So everybody has poor mental health, but when it becomes a mental health problem, is that when those difficult feelings or experiences go on for a longer time, and essentially they affect our ability to live our lives in the way that we want. So we may spend a couple of days feeling just really, we've had enough and it's hard to get out of bed. We just want to sit and watch Netflix in the morning. But actually, if that carries on for a couple of weeks, then it may be considered a mental health problem. So it's normal to feel a bit low for a couple of days, but it's how long that goes on, whether that then becomes a potentially diagnosable problem. And these are things around common mental health problems such as depression, anxiety, or we have phobias, or OCD also falls under this category of a common mental health problem. The most common diagnosis is actually mixed anxiety and depression. And then we also, far less common are severe mental health problems. We see less people in the workplace with these conditions, but these are things around schizophrenia. These are things like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, which also affect the way we perceive the world at times. So people are more likely potentially to experience hallucinations and delusions if they have one of these conditions. So when I was thinking about what to talk about today, it struck me that everything we do, communication is at the heart of everything we do at the Trust when we're talking about mental health. So it's about stigma, it's about language. How can we make sure that people access language that actually helps other people feel comfortable? Or disclosure, how do people feel able to talk to their manager or to their GP or to their partner about how they're feeling? And then it's like two-way street. So it's about how those people listen to us, how they give us empathy and help give us the space to talk about how we might be feeling. And then it's also about how we guide colleagues, individuals, friends, partners, how it's not just about, telling them what to do. Well, it's not about telling them what to do. It's about thinking about, well, what has helped them in the past? Do they have someone they can talk to help people guide to find their own support mechanisms? And then also about those other services, about signposting people to different services. So all of that falls under how we communicate with each other, how we give people the space to listen and feel safe in talking about their mental health. And this is pictures of Charlie. This is the charity that we set up, or that was set up by the parents. So Charlie was 28 when he took his own life. He'd been suffering from depression, and his parents felt that he wasn't given the support that he could have had by the workplace, by other people. They didn't recognise and spot the signs. Now, the same outcome may have happened still, but what they felt was more important was about raising awareness and education and insight in terms of how we communicate and think about mental health. So to help avoid other people like Charlie, same things happening to their families. So as I said, to my mind, the area that we really need to focus on as workplace wellbeing experts is to think about those other professionals around us who can really help promote the messages. So we did a survey recently, and I just want to share this with you. I'm part of the Council for Work and Health. I'm co-chair of the mental health group. We were doing a conference, and we asked our delegates what they thought success looked like. So if they were developing a program or putting on a workplace wellbeing program, what would they know? How would they know it was successful? What actually would success look like? And I'm just going to give you 4 options, and I'd be interested to see which ones you think. So what does success look like in terms of your program? Is it about increased productivity, whatever that might mean in your organization or for yourself if you're self-employed? Is it about more conversations about mental health? Would that mean the program's been successful? Is it about staff more willing to disclose and talk about things, maybe talk about when they're struggling? Or is it about those senior leaders buying in? And I just wonder whether anyone wants to just put in the chat which one you thought was the top answer that people thought was the sign of the most successful program. Nice. Thank you. Yeah. Great. Oh my goodness, this is so good. We have moved far from where we started. So it used to be all about increased productivity. That was the thing that, if you look at any of the literature in the past, it was all about, we need people to work better. We need people to be less sick. We need people to, make more widgets, whatever that looks like. But the top answer was about more conversations about mental health. And that may be, like we saw last week with Mental Health Awareness Week, just saying, I'm feeling a bit lonely, I feel a bit alone, things are a bit difficult. It doesn't mean that person has a mental health condition. It just means they're talking about how they're thinking and how they're feeling and how they're behaving. Staff more willing to disclose was the second most popular answer. So if that's what success looks like, what are the reasons, what are the barriers to why these things don't necessarily land as well? So I'm going to do the same thing here. So what do you think are the barriers that might prevent that successful implementation? So is it about line managers not being confident to have those conversations? Is it about people that weren't aware of the support services? Is it about people saying their workload is actually too high to use them? Or is it about the cost? And again, I'll be interested to see what your thoughts are in that one. Yeah, there was quite close things in all of these. And I think it's really interesting that C is the one, because C was the second one that came up, which sort of made my shoulders slightly slump, because it's yes, absolutely. Because often we put in these programs, but we don't think about the environment and the infrastructure in which they're being promoted. But the thing that came out top, which actually made me feel slightly encouraged, which I know is slightly weird, was people weren't aware of the support and services that were on offer. And this is why when I thought about who I was talking to today, is how we can get those messages or that program to land more effectively with people. The second highest was workload, too high to use them. So that whole joining up of those programs and recognizing what people have going on in their lives is absolutely crucial. Those things are going to be the biggest enablers. So in terms of enablers, I then thought about how I work with lots of organizations. I have a consultancy as well, and I work with very large branded organizations about how they can take a very strategic look. And as I said, I think at the table, who often not at the table early doors when we do these things, is finance, and finance always need to be there because they can tell you whether you can afford it or not, and communications. Communications piece is, to my mind, the golden thread that needs to start right from the beginning. Now, hopefully, I'd be really interested to hear from some of you if you do work in this space and you do work on wellbeing programs from a communications perspective, whether you've got some great tips that I can take away and share with my colleagues about how this might work more effectively. But I've just come up with a few enablers maybe that would be helpful to you if you are working in this space. So take a strategic approach. I mean, that's my sort of number one for any organization who's looking at doing this. But it's about, from a communications perspective, working with those people who are responsible for wellbeing and making sure that comms, as I said, is a key part of that wellbeing strategy. You'll often have people coming up with some great ideas. We're going to do this and we're going to do that, but they don't necessarily think about how those messages are going to come across. And then think about those, identifying those objectives for the activity from a comms perspective, not just from a wellbeing perspective. So it's not just about, say, reducing sickness absence. It's actually thinking about how many people are clicking onto that page or that message. And then that audience, who are these messages for? And really importantly as well, think about the different channels. There's often programs don't think about people who don't sit at a computer all day. So if you work in the field, if you're, I don't know, maintenance, or you're a nurse or something like that, how can you access the program? So how can we communicate what we're doing? And then again, what success looks like from a comms perspective. Where I used to work at ACAS, we used the OASIS model, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, about that sort of objectives and audience and taking a strategic approach. So number 2 is about being clear on the offer. And this is, as I said, this is why that relationship between comms and well-being, whoever that might be, is so important, because there is such a, it's a bit of a cottage industry now, well-being. There have been so many experts that have risen up over the last couple of years, and there's such an abundance of resources out there. But people are busy, people don't know how to access this, people's brains are already fried from that morning meeting. So thinking about what the offer is it about giving information? Is it about telling people it's about Mental Health Awareness Week? Is it about raising awareness? People see this poster every day, but then when they need it, that's when they need to see it, back of toilet doors, although I don't know how we access people's homes and their toilet doors, but thinking about how that information gets communicated. And then those tangible resources. So this is a great resource from NHS. This is about how people can manage anxiety. So how people might find time to use a resource like this. And maybe this will be part of a strategy when they decide they want to focus on anxiety, on a particular mental health condition. And then things around educating. This is my colleague doing a session about post-pandemic ways of working. And so it's a whole piece about how you can talk about it, think about it, and then integrate it. And then that call to action. Most successful wellbeing programs will always have an element of collective responsibility and collective action. So if your wellbeing program is thinking about doing something like this, is how this call to action is made, but it doesn't get lost amongst this noise. And I'm sure this is, hopefully some of you will already be familiar with all this stuff and we're doing it really, really well. So I'm just talking about where sometimes I've not seen it done so well. And then the third enabler is about what we need from you, really. We need you to help us demystify the language. And if you look at these 6 statements, names, words, we often hear these used by professionals in this space. And I'm just wondering, again in the chat, if you just look at those, how many of those 6 do you think you would be able to sort of put one sentence against to define it? So the 6, how many would you say you could easily just go, this is 4, okay, 3, yeah. 5, good, okay, 3, yeah. So I'm guessing maybe psychosocial risk and psychological safety. Yeah, and again, thanks, Caroline. That's really, it is that constant, consistent definition for most. And what I do when I work with organisations, whilst there are often proper definitions, and clinical definitions, or sort of industry-specific definitions, it's also about well-being, what well-being means to you. So any organisation I go to is, what does well-being mean in your location? And then is that something that's going to be understood and absorbed by the CEO and the person, the gardener or the domestic cleaner? So it's about making language work for you and your organisation. And then we need to move away as professionals from terms like psychological safety and psychosocial risk, because those don't mean anything, they don't land. And that's again where we need your help to help us translate those really important terms that mean something to everybody who's accessing this information. And then the fourth enabler is about using nudge theory, because this is really about behaviour change. It's about organisational change as well. We mustn't forget that, but it's about those individuals. I've worked a lot on how we help people increase levels of physical activity. I've done quite a lot of projects on that. So it's about that behaviour change. And this is from the Government Insights programme. And it's just about how it can fit in for me, how it's relevant to me, but then that social element. And again, I'm sure you're familiar with this model. So then those are my sort of 4 suggestions, enablers. And then the 5th one really is basically that accepting you can't out yoga a bad boss. So you could have the best wellbeing program in the world, the best communication strategy. But if that organization is going through massive change, there's been trauma, there are people who are, working on the front line, the wellbeing program is not necessarily going to be the most effective solution to that. People demands are off the scale, saying, we're going to do a yoga session at lunchtime. It's contraindicated certain ways to good well-being anyway, but actually people are not going to be able to access it or want to do it. And actually it can cause conflict because people think, well, you've got no idea what we're experiencing. So it's thinking, like I said earlier, really about that environment in which your program is landing. So that's all from me. I hope you found that's helpful. As I said, if you'd like to get in touch, please feel free to do. We have lots of free resources, and we're happy to talk to you about any of the things I've discussed today. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Abigail. Absolutely brilliant, all the work that you're doing, and I think you're, exactly right. It's really encouraging to see that there's more conversations now around mental health. That people are feeling more willing and able to disclose, and that we're moving away from that whole metric of increased productivity being the goal of mental health and well-being. So thank you for sharing that insight today.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Should start my video. Sorry, get my video on. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have James Harkness, who's a strategic change consultant, and he's a trustee for the CIPR's Benevolent Fund iProvision. So over to you, James. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thanks, Ben. And great sessions so far. So really pleased to be on the panel. And today I just wanted to talk something about iProvision and what we do. As Ben alluded to, iProvision is not my day job. I'm a communication professional, and that's what we've been doing for the last, nearly 30 years. But back in March 2019, was asked would I be a trustee of iProvision. So today I want to give you some kind of background to what we do, the sort of support that we give, and also how we have evolved, particularly because of concerns about kind of mental health. Excuse me. So we've been going since 1965. We've helped to date, over 500 people, members of the CIPR and their families. We're a registered charity, and we are independent of the CIPR, providing a confidential service. So I don't see the details of what the applicants say, and there's a anonymous process for people making applications, but we're a benefit for all CIPR members. And in terms of what the specifics, in terms of what we do, we make grants for people who've got kind of specific needs. We help people with respite care and care break costs. We help people getting back into work, and that's obviously been a challenge post-pandemic as well. We provide a kind of confidential helpline. So that's often about offering people and giving people signposting for financial support, how to manage their money. Again, absolutely in confidence as well. And then one of the, the things we've done most recently is about providing the mental health helpline as well. And in terms of who we support our members of the CIPR, but also our students and associate members. We also help people who have maybe retired from the profession, but been a member once, dependents of the above, and also the CIPR staff as well. In terms of where the money comes from, it's useful to talk about that too. So we ask people when you sign up for another year of CIPR to make a donation. So that's kind of one of our key areas that we receive funding as well. We obviously undertake fundraising at group events as well. So often there's kind of raffles and a variety of other good ideas for kind of helping us raise money. We get fundraising by individuals. Our fundraising has been somewhat impacted by obviously less face-to-face events during the pandemic, but we're in good shape because our funds are kind of solidly invested as well. And I think the mental health piece is something that's really kind of hit us as kind of trustees during the kind of pandemic. And I know even on a kind of personal level, like one of the reasons that I am a trustee of iProvision is because I think it's really kind of healthy for all of us to do something a bit different from the kind of day job. And I'm conscious that's something else that needs to be kind of fitted in as well. But that certainly helped me. And I know a number of colleagues in Harkness, which is to say is the consultancy that I do day to day. But in terms of iProvision, we were struck by some of the reports that were coming out from Mind, which is a really solid charity in terms of providing a lot of kind of data in terms of how mental health is impacting all of us. And these are some of the stats that we kind of chewed over as trustees, that, gosh, 1 in 4 of us experience some degree of concerns about our mental health in England in a year. And the number is not really increasing, but what is increasing is the numbers of people who are concerned about money and job security and benefits and changes to the benefit system, which generally make it harder for people to cope. And I think the thing that we took from all of the kind of Mind reports is that from that 1 in 4 people, there's only about kind of 1 in 8 people who receive some degree of treatment, and the treatment is often medication. So it's not about some of the things that we've heard about today from our speakers really as well. The recourse from GPs does tend to be about medication. So we looked at what we were providing and some of the kind of support that we were providing, which is on the next slide. So what we have looked at is our overall offer in terms of iProvision, in terms of what we provide. So we have looked at the kind of resources that we kind of share. We're working collaboratively with other groups and trying to raise our profile and to say what's available, raise the profile of iProvision as well. We run kind of training and events as well. And we've also provided lots of material on our kind of website as well. So far, since we've run the helpline, we put in place a kind of hotline for people who've got concerns about their mental health. We've had over 145 inquiries in, gosh, just over 18 months. We've had hundreds of downloads of material, and we've provided 6 counselling sessions, obviously free of charge, with PACP professionals as well. And I think one of the issues that we're keen on is that we provide access to people who are obviously qualified and regulated in a non-regulated world of mental health as well. So here's just a couple of examples, a couple of stories from people. These are obviously anonymized, but where people have kind of reached out for help to iProvision, and the support we've been able to get. So Abigail, who has been a beneficiary, she was diagnosed with cancer, and she contacted us because she had concerns about paying her bills. And we were able to give her some one-off grants to kind of help her with kind of funding and help her as a kind of stopgap, and hopefully try and relieve some of the kind of stresses and money worries that she had as well. Another beneficiary is Tom. He's been a beneficiary. He's actually been in prison. He's suffered bereavement and a whole variety of kind of challenges which have led to kind of financial hardship. And in terms of getting himself back on his feet, he decided to do an Open University Master's degree. And the challenges was kind of funding, things for kind of money for laptops and resources. And again, we were able to make grants to him to help him not just buy equipment, but also to support him with kind of rent and deposit. And the third one I just wanted to share with you is Beatrice. So her child, just at the very, very early stages, was diagnosed with leukemia. So she was still on maternity leave. She hadn't gone back to work. And yeah, I think it's fair to say her whole world was turned upside down. So obviously she was facing a whole variety of other bills on kind of income that was challenged in terms of getting to hospital visits, all during a kind of pandemic as well. So we were able to make her some grants to help support her and provide some kind of stopgap support. So I suppose my kind of message to you is to be aware of iProvision. I certainly wasn't aware of a great deal in terms of what we did. It is a benefit of CIPR. It is a benefit of all of us that are a member of the organization as well. To do think about making donations to us, particularly at kind of membership renewal times. I think we still ask for a tenner. If you can gift aid it, so much the better, because we get the benefit from the tax too as well. And do think of us when you're thinking of doing some good causes in your group and raising some money, because it certainly goes into the funds and helps us all. And do share the word about what we're doing. If you'd like to know more, do obviously look at the website or get in contact with me. And we've got some contact details of the support services, support@iprovision.org.uk, or the telephone number obviously as well. And those obviously are dealt with totally in confidence and not seen by any trustees. So let me thank you for sharing some of the work that we do.
That's great. Thank you ever so much, James, and all our panelists. I think there's something there for everyone, whether it's a 5-minute exercise that we can do at the desk during the busy day, but importantly, I know iProvision is actually something that all the committees are keen to promote. And actually, even if we as individuals might not need the benefit here and now, actually, we all know other members, former members. So I think that's really insightful to understand actually the work that iProvision is doing, and that we can at least signpost others, in those times of need. So thank you. We've got an opportunity now for some Q&As for our panelists, and it can be on any of the topics. Recognizing the sensitivity of that, I'm going to suggest that we stop the recording at this point, in case people want to be a bit more open and not have it on camera. So I'm going to ask the magic behind the scenes, Joanna, to perhaps do that for us, if that's